Hello, folks. Good afternoon, wherever you are. It's afternoon on my end, and welcome to this tutorial. Uh, my name is Engineer Uma Nyang in collaboration with the People Networks. And in this tutorial, it's a HTML crash course for beginners, and it's a continuation of the first part where we had left from. And if you haven't watched the first part, then you can watch it. The link is on the description. So we just want to continue without wasting time from where we left, and we were talking about HTML tags. In our last tutorials, just to revisit in 20 seconds, whatever we did in the last tutorials. The last tutorial, I gave you the HTML format. Secondly, I gave you the HTML tags. I explained the difference between a div tag and a span tag, what the div tag can do and what the span tag can do. I explained the single tags and the double tags. Now, just to reiterate, the single tags, I say that they are tags which are normally complete the way they are. They don't have closing tags. There's a one tag without a closing tag. So in HTML5, we have the single tag, which we have the BR, which is the break for breaking to another line, for the link, which is for linking style sheets, the input, which is used for the input in a form, and the double tags, we have the div, the P for used for paragraphing, span, I explained above what the span does, what the span does, the header, and the nav for the navigation bar, the script, and H1, H2, which are for headers, and I say that they move up to H6, and form, which is used for form. So today, without wasting time, I want to handle at most four tags. At least four tags. I want to handle at least four tags, and we're going to spend much time on the input tag. So I'll just come and clear everything so that I just remain with the HTML format which I had created. And if you haven't watched this, you can go to the description. You'll find a link to the first part of this tutorial. This is the second part. So we are not far away. Today, I want us to talk about the input tag and the form tag and the button. In general, we are going to create a form. And for any website, a form is used to transfer or it's used to collect data from the client and also to present data to the client. So you can use a form to collect data from the client, and you can use the same form to display or to give back the data to the client. So it's a two-way, and mostly forms are used for taking data from clients. And just to begin with, we will start if you are writing or if you are doing a form, and whatever we are going to do, we are going to do a pure form without any styling because it's a beginner's course and we are starting with HTML, so we won't have any styling. We will have the div tag, and I said you can have as many divs as you want. There are no limitations. You can have as many divs as you want, provided you need your elements to be in form of block elements. I'll just clear here. Yes. So I'll have the div tag here. And inside this div tag, any form, we must start with the form tag. We must start with the form tag, and it's a double tag, so we have to close it. And anything we are going to write should be inside or between the tags, the opening and the closing tag. So in the form, we have form, then we have something called action. Action is where we are sending this form to, or where we want our form data to be processed to. Imagine we had something like a login form, and if I can give an example of a login form, if there is uh, just a login form, if there is, okay. If I can give an example of a login form, I'm bringing it on board. So a form, it normally have somewhere where that data is processed. It's a good practice when you have your form input being submitted to a back-end page where we have now the programming language acting or processing that input data. So, uh, where this action, for now, I'll have it at as hash. If I have it as hash, it means that the same form data are being submitted on the same form or on the same page where it's which is index.html. Then the form method we are going to have is as post and get. Form method post and get. The difference between post and get. In a browser, we normally have something called we have this as a browser, and this we call an address bar. Here we call this an address bar. So when you have an address bar, that input data we need it as secure as possible. So we don't want that data to be displayed on top of this address bar. In that when we submit that data, we want it to very secure. So when you want to post data to the backend form without that data passing through the address bar, then you use post, which is very secure. And the difference between post and get is that get posts data. I'm sorry to use the word post, but it's like it sends data through the address bar. So you'll have something like question mark, then name is equals to the name which you've entered. If it's blank, it will be blank, and age is equals to, if it's blank, it will remain blank. So post normally send data in such format. Sorry, get normally send data in such format by sending the data through the address bar. So you'll find the data on the address bar. And we recommend that if you are taking data from clients or from somebody, then you use the method post. So we normally have one method called post. Then we have something enctype, which is a form of encryption, and you are encrypting the data in that form in a way that the data is secure, such that when somebody is sending very confidential data, then that data cannot be intercepted by a third party individual. So the enctype, we normally have something called multipart stroke form data. So basically, all your forms are going to be in this format. You'll have the form, the action, the method, and the enctype. After writing the form, then we can have another div. Div can be written anywhere, and you can have as many as you can. It's just that we want them to appear in form of a block. And in this div, we are going to have something called a label. A label, and the name of the label, I'll call it name, and I'll have another tag inside the div and I'll call it an input. I'll call it an input type, and that's what we are going to look more today, or we are going to study more today, the input types. So we have the name and the input type, and we have the button, the button and the button we can call it save, or let me just say log in. And yes, so let me just leave it like that, and we save, then we run it on the browser, or we just refresh the browser and I have it here. So when you can see my form. I have a name, I have this, and I have log in. When I press log in, if this form is supposed to submit the data which the user inputs here to the backend form, or from wherever you directed the form to send the data to. The input type is not defined. And when you can see this login, my login button, it's in line with my form. So meaning it's in the same div. They are like inline elements. So when I want to push it down so that it appears in its own line, then I can have it in its own div. And that's the importance of div. It aligns elements as block elements. So I'll just have another div, and inside this div I'll have the button login, such that when I refresh, you will see it. The login button comes down. I can add some more as I can add some more fields by just saying this name, and I copy this and I call this password, and I'll just call this username, and I save, refresh. So you can see there is no space left, but worry not about that. We'll rectify that. So you can see our username, password, and login. Now, I want to talk much about this input tag. It's very important. A username can normally it's a text. So we usually have an input type of the type text. The name is the name you will give it, so that when it will be sending this data to the backend page, or to the processing page, or to the scripting page, at least that data will be going named. Yes, it will be going as a key value pair, something like that, such that we can have name, then I call it Africa. So the name can be Africa. So when this data will be posted to the backend site, it will be going with the name, then Africa. It's a key in the value pair. Password, we normally have an input type of a password. So the password will have the dots or the asterisks, and when we check this, I'll just I'll just refresh. I don't want to use any styling. When I type here, you can see when I type this name Africa, and when I type the password, it's in form of dots, which is very secure. Maybe if somebody was your neighbor, you are sitting there cyber cafe, you are entering your password, then somebody can't see your password very easily. So it's much secure when you are filling in some details in the form. Another input type I need us to discuss. We have the name, we have the password type. I'll have so many of them. Okay, username, password. Another one we have is called an email. Another one we have is called a number. Another one we have is called a file. Another one we have is called a date. Another one we have is called time. Another one we have is called hidden. Another one we have, let's work with this first as others comes. We have email, number, file, date, time, hidden. So let's say that the input type is for type email, and they have to be in lowercase. The number will just have it as number. The file will write is at as file. The date, I'll just write it as date, and the time, I'll write it as time. Hidden, I'll write it as hidden. Then I'll just refresh my browser to see them. So I'll just do this so that you can see it clearly. Yes. Now you can see the input type of the type email, let me just correct something. I can see some v somewhere. If you write anything outside a tag, then it will appear disorganized. Everything must be written inside a tag. So you can see the name is of the type, let's refresh, is of the type text. So we can just write the name is Africa. The email, then password, it's of the type, I can call it hidden, but it will give you form of dots. The email is of type email. So when you write anything done without an at, it will give you this error that please include at in the email address. So done is missing that. So it should be an email format. But if you want to do much validation of that email, because somebody can write done at Google, and okay, we don't have the at, so let me just rectify that. Done at Google, it will take it as an email. So the data have been cleared because that data have been submitted. So if you place on login, every data here is going to be cleared. So let me just have it as, let me have the the method as get, so that you understand what get means. And refresh and refresh this. Okay. Now, name, I call it Africa. Password, I gave it that. Email, I gave it done at Google. So you can see that it only needs at. But to do a proper validation, you can do a proper validation using JavaScript or a server-side language, so that somebody inputs a correct email done at googlemail.com. Then we have the number. You can see we can add the numbers, reduce. It's in form of numbers, and when we try typing on letters, it won't pick. File. When you click on file, it opens this. It opens a folder or a directory where you can pick a file. And just to pick a file, let me just pick on that. You can see the file name here. Yes, so you can click on that to pick a file or to select a file. So the input type have to be file. Another input type we have is date. So this is the HTML date format, and it will give you the today's date. You can see today's date is 18th January 2021, and when I pick it, you can see it gives you date. The input type of time, when you click it, you can choose on time, and I have that. The input type hidden hides this box. It's a box that is existing, but the user on the front end won't see that input type. So it's hidden. That's why you can't see the input box. It's not here. It's hidden. So only the label will have it. There are sometimes that we need to use an input type hidden in forms, such that when we want to pick a certain ID, a variable's ID, and we want to hide it from the user such that the user cannot see it. Then we'll have the input type hidden under, we'll have the input type hidden under the input type, but we are not going to have it as labeled. We'll not have it as labeled, so that it doesn't have any trace purely on the front end. So when we have removed this input type hidden, I'll just remove the label and save and refresh and refresh. Then it's not here, but it's existing on the back end. Then, as I think of more input types, then we have the button, which is normally used to submit data. The button can do a lot of things. First, when we have the button, these are default HTML. There we have them in HTML. Button, we have the button type. We can specify the button type and we call it submit. We can have the button type and I call it reset. Yes, for now we'll only use those two, submit and reset, and I'll call this reset. The difference between submit type and reset type, in fact, I want to submit this data so that you can see it. I'll just choose no file chosen. I'll just choose on Africa. Okay, I'll just choose on Africa. Password, I'll write that. Email, I'll write. Then on number, I'll just write any number. Then file chosen, I'll choose a file, open. Then I'll choose the time. Then I'll press on login. Now, we said I tried to explain the difference between the guest and the post. If you see here, I have Africa is equals to Africa. Yes, and I think I made that mistake here. This is supposed to be blank so that it can input the users or it can pick the user's input. So if I refresh it once again, it's supposed to take name or username is equals to Africa, and it's not taking anything because we've not given these tags names. So if you want to give them names, then you'll come here and write name is equals to username. I'll write here name is equals to password. I'll come and write here name is equals to email, and right here I can write here my number. I can write here my file. I can write here today, today's date. I can write here today's time, and every input tag in a form or any input tag in a form, you need to give it a name. Yes, and that's why I'm giving everything a name here. I can say here my code or my ID, because mostly hidden I use to host IDs or to hold IDs. Then button, we can have the name as login, and reset, I can give it the name, it's not right. I can give it the name login, and here button, I can give it the name submit or reset. I can give this a reset button. And when I refresh, I'll just remove this. So our form method is get. If our form method is get, then expect that every information that we'll submit through the form, they'll appear in the URL bar. We'll have a question mark here, then we'll have that data here. So we can give the name is Africa, or let me say Nyang. Then password, I can give it as that. Email, I'll call it as admin@admin.com. Number, I can choose any number. File, I can take a file here and open. Then the date, I can take any date. Time, I can choose the time, PM. Then I log in. If we are using the get, you check the URL bar, you will see that every information that we are submitting is passing through the URL bar, and we have the username is equals to Nyang, and password is equals to that. Email is equals to admin at that.com. My name is equals to that. So it passes all the data we gave it through the URL bar. Now, if you should not use get while sending data. There's a way, there are instances where we use get, but not while submitting users data to the back end, because that's not secure. Their data will not be secure. So in that way, we will use a post. And when we use a post here, this data, everything that we'll have here will not be here. We'll not have anything here. We'll not have anything here. And when we just give it another name, or we just fill the form again, email, I can say that number, I can give it any number, choose file, I can choose any file, and date, I can get that, or I can just click on today. I just come here and click on today, and time, I can just, it's giving me the time now, so I can just pick on that time and log in. That data have been submitted without passing through the URL bar. And it's giving this hash because I didn't specify a scripting form or where this data is going to be submitted to. That's why we have it as hash. So if you're processing your data, or you have that backend language, you're processing this input information here, then you better leave it at blank. Don't write anything, or don't put it as hash, write it as blank. Another thing that I would like you to know about input tag and about the forms is that there are a lot of ways in which you can play around with this form. Yes, you can gonna play around with this form. You can say that you can restrict that number. I need somebody to not write numbers more than 5. So I can just come here number outside. Then I can say mean length. I can regulate the minimum length of input I need in an input tag. So I can say mean length is equals to 5, meaning the minimum uh, number of input value should be 5, and I can also specify the max length, and I can say 6 or 8. So you can't your characters can't be less than 5 characters and can't be more than 8 characters. Maybe when you're dealing with the passwords, you can specify that, something like that. And when I go back to the form and refresh, when, when I go back to the form and refresh, then then when I go to, I think it was on number, yes, and I just write 25 and log in, it should give me an error, or it should give me an error that this input, whatever we are trying to input, is less than the required number of characters. So it should give you that you need, or you are required to input this specific number of characters. Another uh, attribute, we call these attributes. For your information, the min length, max length, we call them name, we call them attribute. Types is an attribute. This input is a tag. This is an attribute. So the attributes, the values of the attribute type, we have file, number, email, password, text, time, date, hidden. We have so many of them. Another attribute we have is disabled. Uh, Let me have it here. Disabled. What disabled does, we just remove that so that it remains disabled. Whatever the attribute disabled does is that disabled, it disables the input field so that the user cannot write anything in the field. So when we refresh, then the input disabled, I had it on name, I had it on email, so you can see the email is disabled. So it can have a default value, then we don't want the user to interfere with our default value. So we will just come here, I write value, and I say admin at mycompany.com. So when we have that, as the default value. Any here can have a value, a default value, but the user can change. But if you don't want the user to change nor to edit, then you can use the disabled. And when we refresh, now you can see admin at mycompany.com, but the user can't edit it. But when you are submitting the form, this value will be submitted. Another attribute we have is the attribute placeholder. The attribute placeholder, it gives the user directions on what you expect or the kind of input you expect. A placeholder, we can say a username, and we say tell the user enter username or email. Enter username or email. And when we refresh, we have it as a placeholder. A placeholder is not permanent, and when you start typing, it will disappear. Yes, so a placeholder is just like to holding the place, or it's like giving the user the kind of inputs, direction on the kind of inputs you expect. Yes, so when you have a placeholder, it gives the direction to the user. But whenever a user start typing, then that user will be, or that placeholder value will disappear. It won't be seen. Another in placeholder can be anywhere. We can have a placeholder except in password, because you don't, unless you want to give the user a directive that your password should be not less than 8 characters. We can have a placeholder in email, number, anywhere with any of the input uh, attribute, any of the input attribute, or in the input tag, we can have a placeholder. Then we have another one we have is a pattern. Pattern. A pattern is normally used when you expect a kind of input, some pattern of inputs. So you saw that we had our email system, or we had our email tag, input tag. There's an input tag that we gave the value email, and when we try inputting a value without the at sign, it was giving us an error that we need to have the input, the at sign. So whenever somebody inputs the at but is a broken email, we can say admin at my company, but we don't have the .com. You will see it will be picking at as an email since it have that at sign. So to do further validation, we can use this attribute called pattern. The attribute called pattern, we use it to give the pattern of email, and maybe the pattern of a phone number, and the pattern of a phone number, the pattern of an email, the kind of characters we expect in that input tag. And you can check more about pattern, because much more invalidation you can use through pattern. If you need somebody to input a phone number so that somebody cannot input a dummy text, you can use that pattern attribute to input that data, or to accept or to validate the kind of data you need from the user. Another input type that I have forgotten, or before I forget, we call it the input type tel, or for the telephone. In case you need to pick a telephone number from somebody, yes, and you want the browser to take it as a telephone number, it's not a type but it's an attribute. So we can just have this as telephone, and I can give this just an input type number, and I give it the attribute tel. If I give it the attribute tel, I'll do like that. Then I can give it a value. I can give this a value. As from my country, our phone number starts from 07, so I can just give it 0752 that. If I give that as the telephone number and I come to my browser and refresh, if I come to my browser and refresh, let me do it a way that you can see its functionality. Type number, and I want to have it as disabled so that it can't be edited. Yes. After I have it as disabled, then I can give it a value, a default value. I can give it a value, and the value I just want to take this so that I give it as a value. So when I refresh the browser, you can see it's disabled and it has a value. When I click on it, let me have it this. When an input type is a phone tel for an input, when we have an input, we have the attribute telephone included in an input tag. When somebody clicks on this number, then you should have a pop-up. If you have a soft phone, maybe in your laptop, or you are pressing this input tag from a phone, that you should open your call. It should open you that call dialog where you call dialog menu where you normally uh, insert numbers to make a phone call. So it should initiate a phone call. So if you are pressing it from a laptop or from a computer and you have a soft phone installed, then it should be initiating a call. Another input or another one we have, or another attribute, I said we call this attribute, we have is a very important attribute in form validation, and we call it required. Required is used, you can have required anywhere except for the button. You can have that, you can have that, you can have that, you can have that. Whatever the attribute required does is that somebody cannot submit the form without filling a certain field with this attribute required. So when you come here, so long as all these input tags or these fields are inside a form tag, for it to work, all these tags should be inside a form tag, and that's the reason why I started with the form tag. When I refresh and click on login, it will give you this. Please fill in this field. And when you fill in that field, it will give you another one. Please fill in this field. So it's a form of validation, and validation is the process of authenticating the user inputs if they are valid. So the process of authentication, we call it validation, and that validation, we can do it using pure HTML, and where we won't get full validation using HTML, we can use now other languages. So the required is it assists you that the user cannot submit a blank form or a blank input, because you will have it in every input you will call required. So you can just have required attribute everywhere. Another one we call it auto complete. Autocomplete, and we can give it off. Autocomplete, whatever it does is that, let me just refresh. I like tutoring with practice. Whatever autocomplete does is that when I click, or we call it focus, when I focus here, you can see it gives you a list. It predicts you a list of the possible inputs. So to disable that, such that you don't want the user to get such kind of leads, you'll just come here and give it autocomplete off. Yes. So when you give it autocomplete off, you can have it on the all tags except the button. So when you have autocomplete, then when I refresh, I have it here. I focus, then you don't see the leads or you don't see that drop down list. So the autocomplete it gives you provided you have saved passwords and usernames in your computer, maybe in your cache, then when you focus on an input tag, it will give you the list of possible inputs depending on whatever you inputted last in the last form you filled. Now I'm winding up with a very important input tag we have, and we call it a text area. A text area is normally used to input data. It's expandable and it's normally used to input data that I can say large amount data that has so many characters, text that have so many characters. It can host text, emails, anything. So just refresh so that we can understand it better on what's a text area, and you can see it. We can expand it depending on the size of data we need, and we can have any kind of the data we need in the text area. We can have it in any size. We can modify it. If you refresh the page, you'll see to the default page. And the styling of this form all is done using CSS, which will be our next topic. But for now, thank you for watching, and I urge you to watch the third part of this section. And that's all I had for that form input tag and the form, where we've discussed about the most very important attributes, the input types, which you'll be using often and every time while creating a form. If you have any question, you can post it on comments where somebody can assist answer, or I will assist you answer if somebody answers, or you can send me an email directly with any question or any issue of concern. Thank you for watching, and I'm still Engineer Umanyang. See you